She thought it was just another hard day at work, struggling to make ends meet. But when she helped an old man everyone despised, she had no idea she was stepping into a life-changing storm. That frail, ignored man was the grandfather of the company's ruthless CEO. Her small act of kindness would unravel secrets, test loyalties, and lead to a fate no one could have imagined. When the truth comes out, will she be ready for what awaits her? Story starts soon, but first, comment below, where are you watching from? Sophie wiped her hands on her worn-out apron, exhaustion evident in her every movement. The small diner where she worked was her lifeline, barely helping her survive in the expensive city. Customers came and went, but one man always stood out, a frail, grumpy old man who was always alone. Other waitresses avoided him, rolling their eyes whenever he entered. They called him Old Miser, claiming he never tipped and only brought trouble. That evening, as the storm raged outside, the door swung open, and there he was, his coat drenched, his hands trembling. The other waitresses exchanged glances and quickly busied themselves elsewhere. Sophie sighed and stepped forward. "Let me help you," she said gently, guiding him to a booth. His eyes, sharp yet tired, studied her for a moment before he nodded. She brought him a warm meal, expecting nothing in return. "Why are you helping me when others avoid me?" he asked, his voice rough but curious. Sophie shrugged. "Because kindness costs nothing," she said simply. For the first time, the old man smiled, a small, fleeting moment that went unnoticed by everyone except Sophie. As the night deepened, the diner emptied. Sophie saw the man struggling to stand. Without hesitation, she rushed to help, steadying him as he gripped the table. "I will call a cab for you," she offered. But before she could, a sleek black car pulled up outside. The diner's manager, who never paid attention to Sophie, suddenly rushed forward. "Mr. Lancaster, why did you not tell us you needed assistance?" he stammered. Sophie frowned. "Mr. Lancaster?" That name sounded familiar. Then, the diner's doors opened again. A tall, impeccably dressed man stepped in, his presence commanding. His cold eyes locked onto Sophie before shifting to the old man. "Grandfather, what are you doing here?" Sophie's heart stopped. "Grandfather?" Sophie felt her breath catch. "Grandfather." The cold, intense man standing before her was none other than Ethan Lancaster, the CEO of Lancaster Enterprises, one of the most powerful business tycoons in the city. She had seen his face on magazine covers, heard whispers of his ruthless business tactics, and now he was standing just a few feet away, looking at her as if she had committed an unforgivable mistake. The old man, now identified as Mr. Lancaster's grandfather, sighed. "I just wanted a meal, Ethan. Is that such a crime?" His voice held both frustration and weariness. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You should not be wandering around alone. You know how dangerous it is." He then turned his piercing gaze toward Sophie. "Who are you?" Sophie straightened her posture. "I work here. Your grandfather needed help, so I helped him." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he did not believe her. "People do not usually help without a reason." Sophie exhaled, keeping her voice steady. "Maybe you are used to people wanting something from you, but kindness does not always come with a price." A flicker of something unreadable crossed Ethan's face, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. Without another word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black card. "If you ever need anything, call this number." He placed the card on the table and then turned to his grandfather. "Let's go." The old man hesitated. He looked at Sophie for a long moment before nodding. "Thank you," he said softly. Sophie simply smiled. "Take care." As they left, the diner erupted with murmurs. "Do you even realize who that was?" one of the waitresses whispered. Sophie stared at the black business card on the table, her fingers hovering over it. Ethan Lancaster's personal number. She had no intention of calling, but fate had other plans, because just 2 days later, Sophie received an unexpected visitor, a man in a suit standing at her doorstep, holding an envelope. "You have been invited to Lancaster Enterprises," he said. "Mr. Ethan Lancaster wishes to see you." Sophie's hands tightened around the envelope. What could he possibly want from her? Sophie sat frozen, staring at the crisp envelope in her hands. The Lancaster family was the kind of elite she could never imagine crossing paths with. Why would Ethan Lancaster, a man who ruled the corporate world with an iron fist, want to see a simple waitress like her? Her instincts told her to ignore it, but curiosity burned inside her. Finally, after hours of debating, she took a deep breath and decided to go. The next morning, she stood in front of the towering Lancaster Enterprises building. The glass doors reflected her nervous face, but she squared her shoulders and walked inside. A receptionist greeted her with a polite but distant smile. "Miss Sophie, Mr. Lancaster is expecting you." Moments later, she was led into a grand office. Ethan stood near the window, his sharp eyes studying the city below. When he turned, his gaze locked onto her. "You came." Sophie crossed her arms. "I did, but I have no idea why I am here." Ethan studied her for a moment before gesturing toward a chair. "Sit." She hesitated but eventually did. "My grandfather spoke about you," Ethan said, his tone unreadable. "He said you were the only one who treated him like a person instead of an inconvenience." Sophie frowned. "He is a person. Why would anyone treat him otherwise?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Because he chooses to keep his identity hidden. People see an old man and assume he is worthless. Even in my own company, no one dares to question who he really is." He paused, then leaned slightly forward. "But you did." Sophie exhaled. "I just did what was right." Ethan tapped his fingers against the desk. "That is exactly why I called you here." She narrowed her eyes. "I do not understand." "I want you to take care of my grandfather," Ethan said firmly. "Be his companion. Keep him company." Sophie blinked. "You are offering me a job?" "Yes." His gaze was unwavering. "You are the first person he has spoken about in years. Whatever you did, it meant something to him." Sophie hesitated. This was not what she expected. But then she thought of the old man's kind eyes, his loneliness, and how the world ignored him. Before she could stop herself, she nodded. "When do I start?" she asked. Ethan smirked. "Now." Sophie never imagined that one act of kindness would change her entire life. But here she was, stepping into the Lancaster estate, an enormous mansion that looked straight out of a fairy tale. The butler led her inside, where Mr. Lancaster, the old man she had helped, sat in a grand study, sipping tea. His eyes lit up the moment he saw her. "Ah, Sophie, so, my grandson convinced you." She smiled. "It seems he did." Ethan stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. "Your job is simple. Just keep him company. Make sure he is comfortable." "He can be difficult," Mr. Lancaster scoffed. "I am right here, you know." Sophie chuckled. "I think we will get along just fine." Days turned into weeks, and Sophie's presence brought a new warmth into the Lancaster household. She and Mr. Lancaster would talk for hours, about life, struggles, and dreams. She learned that he once built Lancaster Enterprises from nothing, but after retiring, he became invisible to those around him, even his own family. "You remind me of my late wife," he said one evening, his voice heavy with emotion. "She had the same kindness in her heart." Meanwhile, Ethan remained distant, always buried in work. But Sophie noticed the way he silently observed her, the way his cold exterior slightly melted whenever he saw his grandfather smiling because of her. One evening, as Sophie prepared to leave, Ethan unexpectedly stopped her. "You are different," he said, his voice quieter than usual. She raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment?" He smirked. "Perhaps." Then, after a long pause, he added, "You have changed things here. My grandfather, this house, even me." Sophie felt her heart skip a beat, but before she could respond, Mr. Lancaster suddenly appeared. "Enough staring at her, Ethan. Just marry the girl already." Sophie gasped, her face heating up. "What?" Ethan looked startled, but then he chuckled. "Grandfather, you are impossible." Mr. Lancaster winked. "Mark my words, boy. You will realize it soon enough. Sophie laughed nervously, brushing it off. But deep down, she could not ignore the way Ethan was still looking at her. And maybe, just maybe, Mr. Lancaster was right. Sophie laughed nervously at Mr. Lancaster's words, brushing them off as an old man's playful teasing. But as the days passed, she could not ignore the way Ethan's eyes lingered on her a little longer, how his once cold demeanor softened around her, how he started making excuses to stay home instead of drowning himself in work. One evening, as Sophie sat in the garden with Mr. Lancaster, he sighed, watching the sunset. "You know, Sophie, I am not getting any younger." She smiled. "You are still strong," he chuckled. "Strong enough to see what is right in front of me, and strong enough to push things in the right direction." Before she could ask what he meant, Ethan stepped outside. His usual composed expression seemed conflicted, as if he was debating something. Finally, he spoke. "Sophie, can we talk?" She nodded, following him inside. They stopped in the grand hallway, the air thick with something unsaid.